Hi, everyone. My name is Jeannie Vitoni, and welcome to Conversations on Sex, Addiction, and Relationships. I'm here with my colleagues and buddies, Wendy Conquest and Dan Drake. And today we have a special guest, one of the three authors of the book, Light in the Dark. And we've got Culle Vande Garde with us to help talk about this subject, as well as share her experience of bringing this information together and presenting it to you all. So, Culle, would you give just a general overview of the book and kind of share with our listeners and introduce them? And
Yeah,
for people out there, I'm putting the book up so everyone can see it.
thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. My name's Culle Vande Garde, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker. And you can see all those letters, the certified partner trauma therapist, as well as a certified sex addiction therapist. As far as the book, uh, highlights of the book, is that what you asked?
Yeah, a
Well,
general
could you
overview.
tell us what it's about first?
Well, I mean, it's kind of interesting. I guess I'd like to start with just kind of how it came to be, if that's
Sure.
okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
Mary Meyer and I ended up in a 12-step meeting through the CSAT community is where we met, and probably in 2017, I think. And we noticed that the two of us kept talking about adult children of sex addicts separate from the rest of the group. And so she and I kind of split off and started meeting on our own. And we both had a lot of passion about this topic, and both of us really wanted to write a book about it. And so, fast forward, one of my colleagues here in Dallas had started the CSAT Mod 1, which Ken Adams is the first person everybody sees. And she came back and she's like, Culle, I know you are so interested in this topic. And the guy, that was at Mod 1 was saying, I am looking for people to help me write this book. And so, of course, I immediately get on the phone to Mary. I was like, Mary, okay. I was like, we've got to get in touch with Ken. And I said, this is our chance. I said, we have to do this. And so she had tried to get a hold of him previously, a few years prior to this. And so she reached out to him, and we were all going to be at the 2018 CSAT symposium. And so she connected with him, told him what we were doing, and we'd like to have a meeting with him. He agreed to a meeting, and we verbally agreed, shook hands, and that's how this got started. So really, I think I the story I tell myself is that we all probably had different ideas of what an initial book would be about, and uh, that it was really, where can we start and get this information out there and talk about, the characteristics, and really kind of framing it, since we've had adult children of alcoholics and, Al-Anon, CODA, etc. It was really how do we open a really heavy door that a lot of people don't want to look at or talk about, whether it's within our professional communities or within the family systems or within society. Because from my perspective, it was really something that nobody wanted to talk about. So we basically put an outline together, and it was starting with those 12 characteristics, an introduction, the 12 characteristics, and that we knew we were going to put our stories into it. And from there, uh, coming up with really the roles that, similar to like an adult, child of an alcoholic. So we were teasing out different roles that come through. I think we started with four and ended up with five, and then we finished with kind of the Bill of Rights and Responsibilities, because one of the big things there is that because growing up in a family system affected by whether you say sex addiction or compulsive sexual behavior disorder, uh, the amount of sexual shame is so high, and there's so much pain, fear, anger, loneliness. There are just multiple. And yet the core of it is the carried shame. So to break through the shame binds, it's like, hey, I do have a right to this health, and it's my responsibility in order to get this is to find this. Because it's if we just say, hey, I have a right to this, you'll end up staying in and not having people validate you, because to break shame binds, you have to really have at least 7 people validate that when you're trying to break it. Like, do I have a right to have healthy sexuality? And in group, having 7 people, yes, you absolutely have a right to have, healthy sexuality. Uh, then so many people, that's so painful because that has been shamed so severely, then it really does become, how do I go about doing that? And that it is my responsibility because I can't go back and get it. So it was important. Um, I think it was really important to me, and I'm not sure about Mary, that it was important to include both of those, that it's like, yes, you absolutely have the right. And I also have a responsibility, and it was a both and. It's really a both and. It's not about an either or.
That makes a
And
lot of sense to me.
yeah.
With it's in my mind, the way I'm seeing this is like it's an action statement. I have a
Yeah.
right to this, which is
Hmm.
a state of being,
Hmm.
and this is the way that I can access control in a healthy way, connect to. It feels like there's an action piece to the responsibility piece.
Yeah, I think it's really about, in my experience of being in this field for as long as I've been here, I would hear people getting through, do I deserve to take up time and space and resources on this planet when they're like suicidal? And you end up having the shame attack and the pain of having been shamed so severely that you really don't know that you can take up time and space. And that pain, it breaks it down, and it's like the wound is open while people are saying, yes, you absolutely. So the medicine is going in and it closes. And then it's like, okay, now what do I do? And so it was really taking another step into maturity and taking responsibility for your own life rather than, okay, I mean, literally getting stuck in, now what do I do? Now, how do I do this?
So,
And let
Culle,
me let me read
I'm
one of
really
them.
wondering, how do people, so a lot of addicts that I work with, when
Hmm.
we get into their family of origin, certain behaviors will start to come to the surface, and that's when I give them your book.
Hmm.
And a lot of times they're shocked, even though there were extramarital affairs, even though dad might go out and be gone for a long time, and mom was really upset, and it turns out that he had a girlfriend, that they can't conceptualize that their parent was a sex addict.
Yeah,
So how is there, do you have, can we talk about that first? Like, how do you start to say, oh my gosh, I think I'm an adult child of a sex addict?
exactly. I think, I think that's a really good question, because I think I've been kind of working on and going back and forth. Mary and I have been, what is a checklist? What's a checklist for this? And it kind of goes with the characteristics. That's a place to start, is definitely those characteristics, because as I believe, the story I tell myself is that the three of you and myself, we know that one affair doesn't necessarily make somebody a sex addict. We also know that, all sex addicts are not necessarily narcissists. So there's a lot of, teasing out as far as what that is. And it's one of the things that in my own story, I needed a therapist who knew what sex addiction was. And
Mhm.
to say, just like we do kind of with alcoholism, or that's the story I tell myself, is that with alcoholism, we were like, have you ever wondered, been curious about, that your mom was alcoholic or your dad, that you kind of just get real curious with the client. And I think this is part of why, for me, it was so important to tell the story and the severity of the impact. Because I think that comes through in all of our stories. And in all of our stories, it's kind of interesting that each of our fathers was also alcoholic, and that, Ken's a baby boomer. I'm a Gen X. Mary's a millennial. So we're still getting the same thing. Okay.
Mm.
And that's significant. And that it's such a misconception of what compulsive sexual behavior disorder is. Because one infidelity betrays trust and can turn your life upside down, just like it does the partners. And so being able to, I think, educate clinicians as far as you're seeing this in your office every day, whether you know this or not, because I don't think clinicians are trained well enough in what this is. Uh, that's part of it, is what is compulsive sexual behavior disorder? And hopefully, in the ICD and hopefully in the future DSMs, that will be, there. Uh, and I think, there's just so much stigmatizing as far as what that means. And there's so much embarrassment, so much shame of, I, since I'm going to age myself now, since, 70s and 80s, it was like, oh yeah, my mom went to rehab for her alcoholism or her Valium addiction, not a big deal. And that to some now, I work with some 20 somethings, and it's like, yeah, it's getting, the porn is so normalized for them because of what they've grown up with in high school and junior high and college. And yet, is it going to get normalized so that we can have these conversations around sexuality? Because it's not where we come from. It just isn't where we come from. So I definitely, in my psychosocial, I do a lot of history with it, and I'm asking about, parents' behavior. And I use a definitive model that, again, sets it up for me to start questioning. And again, I think also one of the things is like the test that we get to use, as far as whether it's the SDI or the PTSIR or the IPASD or the MAWASI, I'm looking for trauma bonding
Okay,
in
and
there.
just for our viewers, the acronyms that Colleen's using, these are all assessments that are available to CSATs. So, uh, which is, so we're certified sex addiction therapists. And so, what she's referring to is trauma assessments, sexual dependency inventory. What are some of the other ones, guys? Help me out.
Yeah, the MAWASI, the money and work adaptive styles, and the intimate partner. I
Right.
always forget what the IPASD stands for. Intimate partner attachment and trauma. Something.
Something, yes, right. Yes. Yeah.
I have a Cully, I just want to say, as far as I know, yours is the first book that addresses the impact of sex addiction on children as adults. So
Sure.
I just want to say I really appreciate you tackling this subject, and I think it's so important for our field that you did this. It was
Yeah.
when I heard about it, I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing that this resource is out there. So I'm
Yeah.
grateful you did it. I'm just curious if we could back up. People may not know the 12 characteristics, so we don't have to go into every, the whole depth of it, but I think just if you don't mind just going through some of the characteristics so that people have an idea of what these characteristics are of adult children of sex addicts.
Yeah, I'll have to go to the book to do that because I
I
won't
don't mean
remember.
put you on the spot.
No, that's totally fine because I
Right
think,
here.
this originally came about, a gentleman, I can't remember his first name, but Hunter in 1997 started writing a list, and we expanded this list because
So
it
this
was
was,
it was
so this
very
was,
basic.
Holly, this was a list in the public domain, or was this a
I'm trying
professional
to
or
think
a?
where we found it because I think we were Googling And I don't know if Ken had it in a presentation he had previously done for ITAP, or if Mary had it, and that it was just real basic outline of like 10 characteristics. And I think we originally had 15 and we got it down to 12 because they were overlapping. So we really were trying to, I mean, 12 went with the 12 steps, and that again, a few of them were overlapping and mixing up. And so that we were trying to be as definitive as we could so that it would give, when we did write on it, that people could go, oh yeah, okay, that. So if I read like an example, the first one is ACSAs carry shame about their sexuality and are often confused about appropriate sexual behavior for others and themselves.
And to be
And
clear
so,
for the listeners, ACSA is Adult Children of Sex.
children of sex addict, yeah. And then we go on to write a whole paragraph, about, having witnessed or been aware of a parent's sexual addiction. ACSAs find their own sexuality a battleground, living in a family that over sexualizes many interactions, such as sexual joking, inappropriate nudity, sexual remarks about bodies and gender, knowledge of a parent's affairs, and other hypersexualized behaviors or experiences. And it leaves children curious and ashamed and later confused about appropriate sexual expression. So, I mean, so that's part of what we did. The second one is ACSAs are often uncomfortable with their bodies and gender and may go to extremes to compensate. They might purposely make themselves attractive to others or overvalue being attractive. And again, it writes, we go through specifically, what does that look like? What might that look like? And have you done it? Because we know we're as children, mom and dad are our first higher powers. They're our first loves of our life. And we look to them about how to do relationship. And so
What I noticed when I was reviewing the characteristics is this opposite polar of very overvaluing or not,
we're not.
trying to be highly attractive or trying to hide one's body.
Mhm.
A lot of sexuality, a lot of sexual jokes, or sex is bad, stay away from.
Yeah.
And is that kind of also what you found throughout the work with folks, or your experience?
I think you have to put that, for me, I don't like the color gray, so I don't use between black and white, go, live in the gray. I'm like, no, we have to live in the color zone. So I think this is also where clinicians' experience comes in as far as, because shame usually is one up or one down in the carried shame dynamic. So the one up is the hypersexualized, the one down is the shutdown, conservative, cover me up, protect myself. And that's often most of the time. And yet, people, like we know with hopefully with carried shame, most of us go up and down based on the trauma because you can get falsely empowered by trauma. And you can also get disempowered, or covert trauma is going to, what that does versus overt, when it's out in the open and everybody sees it. So sorry, I can't talk without using my hands.
Oh, me too. Just to clarify, because that notion of carried shame may be new for people. Can you share more about what that is? Like
Sure.
this idea of carried shame?
Yeah. So I happened to have I was fortunate enough to get introduced to Pia Melody's developmental trauma disorder model when I went to treatment for codependence back in 1986. And the, you know, the concept of healthy versus carried shame was really eye-opening to me because again, I was young. I turned 21 in treatment. And so I had gone to treatment for codependence, when insurance paid for that diagnosis. And that codependence has had such a, it's got an ephemeral meaning to it, what people think it is. And so the concept of, healthy shame really teaching that, or learning that healthy shame gets created in the correcting process when parents are parenting and correcting a child. And so you learn, hey, it's best if I close my mouth while I chew my food. Otherwise, I'm, you know, and that's polite. And that at a certain time, hopefully, mom or dad is going to give you that little intervention. And hopefully she's, they're not going to do it in front of everybody and say, God, chew with your mouth shut for, what are you doing? And if it's done that way, that's a very shaming process. And so healthy shame, when people are out of touch with healthy shame, that they are not God, because healthy shame basically says, I'm not God, I'm imperfect, I'm flawed, I am precious and worthwhile and valuable, and I'm imperfect, and my behavior impacts other people. And if the parenting correction is done in a way, you're going to save that. You're going to have the both and that I'm precious and worthwhile, and I make mistakes. And mom and dad make mistakes, and my brothers and sisters make mistakes, and so do my teachers. And I'm just being human. I'm imperfect. Versus what happens when, in my opinion, when addicts or when people are out of touch with healthy shame, and I don't think our culture has done a real good job with this, and it's where parenting is coming from, just as far as the parenting in general. When we're out of touch with healthy shame, we basically give ourselves permission to say, I'm God. I can do whatever I want, however I want to you at any given time. And it doesn't matter because I'm your mom or your dad. And it also comes from like, it's an emotional contagion that every child is feeling the feelings. They're looking, watching, listening to mom and dad, siblings, aunts, uncles, grandparents, and how they interact, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And so that carried shame unknowingly gets transferred and induced into a child. And most parents, there's no way for us as parents not to somehow induce shame into a kid. That's going to happen. It's about being imperfect as parents. And the difference, though, is being able to repair that, admit you're wrong, and say, I went too far. My behavior went too far. I was too loud. I was wrong. All those things that take some maturity in a relationship with yourself to be able to do and say, oh, I blew it. I really blew it. And I hear that I hurt your feelings, or I hear that I scared you, and that takes maturity. And we don't come from a real mature society in a lot of respects. And I don't think shame is understood well. I mean, Brene Brown has done phenomenal work with shame, and um, this healthy versus carried shame really came from electrical circuit theory, that you're standing anywhere, like if a coil is heated, then the coil next to it's going to also pick up that heat and it's going to transfer. And that when you're a little kid, you don't have boundary systems. That's why we need a parent to protect us and to, protect them, because they don't have physical external boundaries or internal boundaries that work.
And if you're just joining us today, we've got one of the authors, Culle Vande Garde, who is talking about the book, The Light in the Dark. And I also want to give the full title, The Light in the Dark, The Hidden Legacy of Adult Children of Sex Addicts. And it is a book first of its kind. And I know Dan spoke to writing it. I also wanted to give a shout out. I appreciate the way that it was written, because it is written in a very user-friendly way. And so that makes it much more accessible for a lot of folks. So
well, thank you.
So Culle, I wanted to ask, as we have listeners, learning, but a lot of them, I'm guessing, can be asking, okay, so we're in the situation, we're in our healing journey, we're in recovery. What can we do as parents to mitigate, lessen some of the impacts that people in your book are talking about as adults. What can we do right now actively? Do you have
Yeah.
any
I
suggestions for
think, I think one of the biggest, there are a few things. The biggest thing is that it's helpful for people to understand that children growing up in this type of a system have the most similar experience to a partner, and because it's betrayal trauma, and it's really developmental betrayal trauma. They've got a D-Day. However, they discovered something. Their world is turned upside down. Um, and they don't, one of the people or both of the people, because the partner that's been betrayed, their world is turned upside down. It's impacting their parenting, their ability to be present and attuned to the child or children. And then the betrayer or the addict, whatever way you want to talk about it, is, has been absent, or checked out, or medicating in the ways that they have. So it's important it's so important for both partner and betrayer to do their own family of origin work, and release their own carried shame, and then start really learning how to have a mature relationship with yourself, and do parts work, and learn how to regulate yourself, because trust has been broken. And so it really, what I've seen, and this, it doesn't only happen with families with sex addiction, it's just that betrayal creates abandonment, it creates neglect, it's abusive, as well as abandonment, abuse, neglect, and enmeshment. And all of those are betrayal for children. So, and again, I don't think most parents are not waking up saying, hey, I think I want to, neglect my child today, or I think I want to abandon my kid today. Um, and unknowingly, because you're in the process, and because the process takes at least 3 to 5 years, and I think it takes up to 10 years for people to get into a solid recovery, your children are going to be growing. And so, as much, getting safety, what is safety? Restoring safety for children, learning to get comfortable with emotion, for yourself. And the hard part is that whether couples are staying together or not, that you're still parenting, and you're going to make mistakes. And I think it also, what it leads to, and this is probably from my own recovery, I know the difference. I watched my dad get sober from his alcoholism. We went to 5 family weeks in 2.5 years, with 5 of us going into treatment for codependence and then his alcoholism. And I know what I learned. And I needed the same thing with sex addiction. I absolutely needed to be able, I needed education on it. I needed to be able, in a safe way, to do list work with him, as well as my mom. Because I don't think a lot of betrayed partners, I think they're going to be upset with this, that, hey, I didn't do anything.
Mm.
And you do, because in my generation, and I think maybe Ken's, so many women didn't have a place to go if it's like a man as the addict and the female. And that, if my mom would have divorced my dad at that time, she would have been left with nothing and 3 children, because of the court systems. That's changed in some states. And uh, her choosing to stay betrayed herself, and then it betrayed the 3 of us, and it showed up in the 3 of us in our relationships. And I know the difference. And my dad never acknowledged that addiction. He never acknowledged his sex addiction, his infidelity, and his behavior didn't change. And it was all about the shame-based stuff. The rage was worse than ever, the untreated aspects of it. And it's going to show up in your kids' lives.
So what
So,
I'm taking away then is the part of helping the kids feel their feelings
mhm.
in the adult parent,
Mhm.
do their own work,
Do your own work.
so they have good awareness and insight and emotional regulation, and then provide an environment for the children that allows emotional expression, truth telling,
Yes.
age appropriate, of
Age
course,
appropriate. Mhm.
and appropriate physical, emotional, and sexual boundaries.
Correct. Yeah. And that's all a process. We all know that, I believe, as clinicians of how long some of this takes. I would absolutely, I think, I know what's happening right now for what I've done with some of my clients is that the betrayers and the betrayed partners have come together and that they have done a disclosure to their adult kids. And the way it's happened is that the betrayer shares his story of trauma first that led to his behaviors, whether it's being too anxious or acting out sexually or depressed or, gee, I have ADHD and I am on the autism spectrum. And I didn't know that when y'all were, and this is how it impacted your mom. And that betrayal of your mom impacted her ability to parent you. And that betrayal did this. So you're, in essence, that betrayer is making amends to the partner and taking accountability. And then the partner can also share, you know, how this betrayal impacted me. And then I've had them use genograms so that they can hear and see it didn't start with mom and dad, and it started back here. And that, you know, each of us in our own way is really, you know, I wanted, of course, like any book, I wanted, I didn't want somebody else to go through the unbelievable pain and carried sexual shame of what I grew up in, and not having 12-step meetings to go to, not having therapists who understood it. It getting validated by my mother and then never acknowledged by my father, and the incongruence and the impact that had on me, because I knew the difference, and
Interesting.
I didn't understand why was it so hard for my dad to just acknowledge I was wrong, I
Mm.
really messed up, and that I was unfaithful to your mom 3 times.
So
And
profound when the betrayer can step into that
when
role.
they can step in, and that's about getting, so, and in order to do that, in my experience, they have had to have worked with their own family of origin and that carried shame, because otherwise you're going to have a shame attack, and that shame attack will shut you down. And you can't you can't because you don't know you're precious and worthwhile and valuable, and that it's your behavior that's up for debate. Everybody's precious. It's just your behavior,
Right,
and that you're not a big, bad, and awful person.
right.
I know that about, you know, I know that. So,
It's a really good example. Thank you. We're gonna, I think, wrap up there. That the back to what our question was, is what can the parents who are in recovery and doing their healing work do to help their children? And one of the big things I hear you being very emphatic about is do your own personal work in recovery and healing, but also explore more maybe your family of origin so that you have more awareness and thus can change behavior.
And by family of origin, we mean the family that you grew up in.
the
And
family that you grew up in, yeah.
yeah, and so doing your own work, to me, that means a lot of different things, but it certainly can be working with a therapist, working with a coach to explore more around um, certain behaviors that you have that may not be optimal
Yeah.
for doing as an adult, and really dig into issues that you've held resentment around, anger around, things that have scared you or you've been anxious about all your life, and to really do a deep dive to be able to understand that and get skills in order to better work with those pieces. Would that
Yeah.
be?
And especially the eroticized rage,
Right.
because
And
there's so much with the eroticized rage. And that, again, 12-step meetings, there are ACSA meetings now, the COSA, S-Anon, ISA. and the S meetings. 12-step meetings are free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're free.
Great resource.
They're
Dan, I just
free.
want to see if you had any closing comments or before we wrap up.
Well, I just really appreciate the discussion, because I don't have, I guess I do have, that's not true. I do have clients that are adult children of sex addicts. I'd say more often than not, what I'm experiencing is I'm dealing with couples that are parents of kids, maybe they're adults, but they don't know how to handle this part of it. They're just trying to triage, they're trying to heal, they're trying to get through some form of healing on the most, at the most devastating point in their lives. And sometimes I'll ask, how are the kids? And they'll say, oh, the kids are fine. They don't know anything.
Yeah.
Well, they do.
That's
And
just not the case.
it's not the case. Of course, the kids, we were all kids at one point. We knew. I mean, why would we think that it's not? So I appreciate this, and what another difficult step it is to then say,
Yeah.
there is another layer of impact that we never thought would happen, another fallout, and there's other trauma going on. So I guess I appreciate the discussion. It's really, really a difficult topic, but I think so important, because I can imagine just the openness that this book has allowed to so many people to have a voice for what they maybe didn't know how to have a place that fit for them. So I'm just appreciate that and what
Yeah.
you've
No,
offered.
thank you. Yeah. Well,
Thank you,
that was
Culle.
absolutely part of the intention.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time to write the book. We all know how difficult book writing is in general. It takes a long passion and a lot of dedication. Thank you to you, Ken and Mary, for writing the book, but thank you for
Absolutely.
being here and sharing a little bit more about the process and also the vulnerability in which you speak in the book. I mean, I really do admire that. So
Thanks. I appreciate it.
to wrap up, remind everybody that this is The Light in the Dark, was what we're talking about, the hidden legacy of adult children of sex addicts, and Culle Vande Garde, one of the authors. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for the opportunity and to give voice and some more background to this very important topic.
And so if readers, listeners, if you are enjoying this episode, if you would please click the thumbs up or follow and send it to your friends and such, please let us know, because what that does is it lifts us in the ranks, which means other people can find these resources too. So thank you for being here and hope you all are well.